Her son told the realtor she's not part of the decision. Carolyn Pierce, his mother, and the sole owner of the house, heard him clearly. Logan had plans: demo walls, flip equity, take control. By Friday, the sale was finalized, without his signature input or knowledge. He treated her like a footnote. She rewrote the entire ending. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Carolyn Pierce stepped out of the kitchen, drying her hands on a soft linen towel, just as the muffled voices reached her. So we're leaning toward that offer, Logan was saying. She's not part of the decision. Carolyn paused mid-step in the hallway, her own hallway. She saw them through the wide arch of the living room. Logan lounged with one ankle on his knee, gesturing with his favorite pen, the one she'd bought him for his bar exam. Rachel sat with a laptop, balanced on the edge of her knee, eyes lit with purpose. And Heather, the realtor, nodded along with a salesman's poise, her smile just tight enough to be rehearsed. Carolyn didn't speak. She watched for a breath longer than was polite, then turned quietly and retraced her steps. Her slippers made no sound on the hardwood floor. She passed the dining room, the one she'd hosted every Thanksgiving in since 1989, and stepped out the back door into the golden hush of early evening. Texas heat still hung in the air, but the shade beneath the porch eaves was just enough to breathe. Tessa was there already, sitting on the glider with a paperback in her lap and a Diet Coke sweating on the armrest. She glanced up, took one look at Carolyn's face, and shut her book. They showed you their hands, she said gently. Carolyn sat beside her and stared straight ahead. Her face gave nothing. Good, she said after a beat. Now I'll play mine. Neither of them spoke for a while. The cicadas buzzed. Somewhere down the block, a lawn sprinkler sputtered to life. Carolyn could hear the faint hum of Rachel's voice behind the glass. Her tone lifted and fell like someone who'd already picked out curtains. Tessa leaned back, folding her arms. What's the next move? Carolyn stood, brushing invisible lint off her slacks. I'm not folding. She went inside through the side door and up the stairs, avoiding the living room entirely. She didn't trust her face not to betray what she now knew. Her bedroom was a time capsule of quiet order. On the wall, a framed photo of her and Thomas, on the day they closed on the house, his arm around her shoulders, both of them beaming. They'd saved 10 years for the down payment. She knelt in front of the cedar trunk at the foot of the bed and opened it. Inside, wedding keepsakes, birth certificates, paper-clipped mortgage stubs in fading ink. She reached beneath the stack and pulled out a slim leather file labeled Deed Final. Beneath that, tucked flat under yellowed tax returns, was an envelope marked in her own cursive, Ownership Originals. She laid them both on the bed and exhaled. From the hallway, the grandfather clock struck 8. Downstairs, muffled laughter. Logan's voice again, confident. Planning. Carolyn didn't flinch. She slipped the envelope into a canvas tote and retrieved her purse. She checked the side zipper, keys, license, appointment card. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Norman Bell's office. She switched off the bedroom light and paused at the door to look back once. The floral comforter. Her husband's cufflinks still on the dresser tray. Rachel had said they'd turn this room into a home office/flex space. Not anymore, Carolyn thought. She descended the stairs just as Heather let herself out the front door, her wedge heels clicking down the walkway. The porch light flicked on automatically. Logan and Rachel didn't even notice Carolyn, as they continued talking at full volume in the kitchen. Maybe if we gut the dining room wall, open concept. Carolyn passed behind them silently and opened the hall closet. Inside, she reached high, feeling past a row of scarves and shoeboxes, until her fingers closed around the lockbox she hadn't touched in 15 years. She cradled it in her arms like something breakable. In the kitchen, Rachel giggled. Oh, and wait till she sees the mock-ups. Carolyn turned away, opened the box on the entryway table, and slowly, carefully inserted the keys from the labeled envelope into the matching lock. The tumblers clicked. Inside were the tools she'd need: not for war, but for precision. The kind that leaves no blood, just silence. She closed the lid with finality and smiled. The air inside Norman Bell's office carried the faint scent of lemon polish and old leather, the kind of smell that settled into the woodwork after decades of quiet power. Carolyn sat across from the same cherry desk where she and Thomas had signed their final mortgage papers 24 years ago. The blinds filtered the Texas sun into soft stripes across the floor, and the only sound in the room was the soft scrape of Norman's reading glasses as he adjusted them on the bridge of his nose. He took his time reviewing the documents she'd pulled from the envelope, page by page, line by line. Carolyn didn't rush him. That had always been one of Norman's strengths: deliberate, unflinching clarity. He was one of the few men who didn't speak to her like she needed softening. After several minutes, he leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers across his stomach, and looked her in the eye. "You're the sole title holder," he said. Voice even. "No co-signers, no liens, no embedded rights of survivorship. The house is yours, Carolyn. Fully, clean as a whistle." She nodded once, expression unreadable. "Can I list it without informing anyone else, even the ones already acting like it's theirs?" His eyes twinkled. "You can list it blindfolded. No permission, no disclosures beyond the law. If someone wants to sue you, they'd have to invent a time machine and rewrite this deed." Carolyn allowed herself the smallest flicker of a smile. "Good." Norman tapped the manila folder on his desk. "Planning to move out. Planning to move forward." He nodded, businesslike but warm. "I'll prepare the privacy documents. And Carolyn, don't let anyone tell you this is unkind. It's not unkind to defend the life you built." She stood and shook his hand. "It's just overdue." By Thursday morning, a new P.O. box key sat cold in Carolyn's palm. She'd driven herself across town to the quietest branch office she could find, tucked between a UPS store and a shuttered Radio Shack. She declined the digital tracking, the text alerts, the extra insurance. Just the key, please, and a paper receipt. At home, she began the slow, methodical transfer. Bills, financial statements, insurance notices. The only thing she left untouched was the Pierce family household. Costco membership. Logan had renewed without asking. She left that on the fridge. She was in the den relabeling a stack of manila folders when Evan wandered in. His hoodie sleeves were pushed to his elbows, and he held a chessboard under one arm. "Grandma." Carolyn looked up, surprised. "Hey, sweetheart." He hesitated in the doorway. "Why's everyone talking about moving all of a sudden?" Carolyn set the folder down and patted the cushion beside her. He flopped down, long legs sticking out, board balanced between his knees. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "people make big decisions. Talk like they've already won the game." Evan frowned. "But it's your house." Carolyn's voice was calm. "Sometimes people move without checking who holds the key." Evan nodded slowly, like he wasn't sure what she meant, but sensed it was important. He opened the chessboard, started arranging. The knight kept tipping over on the uneven cushion. "Want to play?" Carolyn leaned back. "Not tonight. Got a few more pieces to line up." He smiled faintly. "You're winning already." She smoothed a curl behind his ear. "Only just getting started." That night, after dinner, she opened the front hall closet again and retrieved an armful of sealed letters. One by one, she peeled off address labels and replaced them with new ones carefully printed in her narrow cursive. No one would notice at first. Not until it was far too late. Rachel had left a bag of sample tiles on the kitchen counter, a sticky note attached. "Thoughts? The quartz feels more resale savvy than the butcher block look." Carolyn didn't move the bag. She just opened the drawer beside it, pulled out a roll of masking tape, and labeled the drawer's edge. "Mail redirected. Do not forward." Then she picked up the cordless phone, pressed speed dial 3. The voice on the other end was clear and familiar. "Norman Bell." "It's me," Carolyn said. "Let's talk trust structure next." The scent of cinnamon candles drifted through the house like a sales pitch. Heather paced the living room with a leather-bound portfolio under one arm and her phone balanced on the other. She gestured toward the mantel. "If we declutter and bring in neutral throws, it'll open the space. Mid-century meets light farmhouse, Buyers love that crossover now. Logan stood behind her, arms folded, eyes scanning the walls like he already owned them. She's agreed, right? You're good to start next week? Carolyn stood by the staircase, watching the scene play out. She'd said nothing yet, only given a faint nod that Logan had interpreted as permission. That was his pattern. He heard whatever version of silence suited him best. Heather turned to her, tone falsely bright. We'll keep it tasteful. Just a little emotional warmth, like it's everyone's grandmother's home, not one specific person's, you know? Carolyn smiled faintly. Rachel breezed in from the kitchen, phone in hand. We could even add one of those abstract canvas pieces in the hallway. You know, elevate it. I just emailed you something. Carolyn's phone buzzed in her pocket, but she didn't check it. Instead, she turned toward the front door. I have an appointment, she said quietly. Rachel frowned. Now? But Carolyn was already halfway down the walkway before they could protest. Marie was nothing like Heather. She met Carolyn in a small, sunlit office above a bakery on Spring Creek Parkway. No flashy branding, no slogans about turning houses into dreams. Just a clipboard, a real handshake, and eyes that actually listen. Norman had chosen well. Marie reviewed the papers Carolyn had brought in silence, only glancing up when something required her initials. Her tone was calm, non-judgmental. When she finally slid the listing agreement across the desk, she did so without fanfare. We can market it discreetly, Marie said. Private showings only. No signage. Full control on your terms. Carolyn signed her name with slow precision. Her pen didn't shake. Marie leaned forward. Would you like to set an ask price now, or wait for our internal appraisal? I already have a number, Carolyn said. They just haven't heard it yet. Marie smiled. Then they're not the ones in charge. Back home, Carolyn opened the email Rachel had mentioned. It had a faux gold font subject line. Remodel mood board. Our future equity vision. The first image was a white and gray kitchen, ripped from a design blog, completely unrecognizable from the one Carolyn had cooked in for 37 years. Below that, floating vanities, matte black fixtures, minimalist lighting. None of it had room for soul or casserole dishes. At the bottom, Rachel had written, "Imagine the resale boost. Hope you love it." Carolyn didn't respond. She clicked Save As, created a new desktop folder, and named it simply Entitlement. Then she dragged the email inside and closed her laptop with a soft click. That evening, Evan knocked softly on the bedroom door. You said you wanted help with the albums. Carolyn was seated cross-legged on the carpet, stacks of dusty photo books beside her. She patted the spot next to her. Come sit. You're stronger than me. These boxes aren't light. Evan dropped to his knees and opened one of the lids. Inside were Polaroids from the early 90s. Easter egg hunts, birthday parties, a family trip to the Grand Canyon where Logan wore socks with sandals. Evan smiled. Is this where you and Grandpa got that sunburn? She laughed softly. We didn't realize the Arizona sun is. We learned. They sifted through images together, sliding them into plastic sleeves and labeling the spines with sticky tabs. Carolyn was methodical, 2 boxes labeled keep, one marked storage, and another tagged TBD. Why the just-in-case box? Evan asked, nodding to the third stack. Carolyn looked up, met his eyes with something sharp but warm. Because planning is the opposite of panic. He didn't ask again. As the sun dipped below the fence line, Carolyn stood at the kitchen window, rinsing the last coffee cup. Across the counter, her phone pinged again. This time it was a calendar alert. Marie, confirmed listing date Friday, 10 a.m. Outside, the lawn was immaculate. Rachel had hired a landscaping crew the week before. But Carolyn wasn't looking at the flower beds. She was watching her own reflection in the glass. Behind her, Logan's voice carried faintly from the living room. Heather says we could double our appraisal with the right accent. She'll handle it all. Mom won't mind. Carolyn dried her hands slowly and turned off the faucet. The silence in the house was almost reverent. Late morning sunlight streamed through the plantation shutters, dancing across the polished hardwood floors. The vase of hydrangeas on the console table, strategically placed by Marie, looked as if it had always belonged there. Carolyn stood just out of view in the hallway, listening as footsteps moved lightly through the home. Not Logan's thudding confidence. Not Rachel's clipped wedges. These were quieter. A woman's voice echoed from the den. It's exactly what we've been looking for. Solid bones, no gimmicks, and it doesn't scream flip. Marie's reply was calm and professional. Sellers like to keep things simple. Cash offers preferred. She's willing to move fast if you are. Carolyn peeked around the corner. The couple was in their 40s, clean-cut, composed. He ran a hand along the banister with appreciation. She trailed behind, eyes warm but critical. Carolyn watched the way their shoulders softened as they moved through each room, the way their tone shifted from polite interest to emotional connection. By the time they reached the kitchen, Carolyn was already halfway upstairs. In her bedroom, she knelt beside the cedar chest again, not with the reverence of memory this time, but the urgency of purpose. She opened one drawer after another, sorting items into two piles on the bed. Keep and leave. Her late husband's shaving brush. Keep Rachel's monogrammed guest towels. Leave the antique side table from her mother's estate. She hesitated, fingers resting on the carved leg, then gently slid it into the keep column. She was halfway through the jewelry box when Tessa appeared at the door, leaning against the frame with her usual quiet note. Is today the day? She asked softly. Carolyn didn't look up. The offer's in play. They just don't know it yet. Tessa walked over and picked up a scarf from the leave pile. It was silk pale blue and still carried the scent of lavender sachet. You're not running, she said, folding it slowly. You're reclaiming. Carolyn looked at her, eyes sharp. I know. Downstairs, the front door closed. Marie's voice grew distant as she walked the buyers out. A few seconds later, Carolyn's phone buzzed on the dresser. She picked it up, squinting at the screen. Logan, voicemail. She pressed play. His voice was relaxed, assured. Hey, Mom, don't worry about the paperwork stuff, okay? Heather's got it covered. Just hold tight and let us handle things on our end. We've got momentum. No need to slow anything down. Click. Carolyn deleted the message without a second thought. She turned to Tessa. They don't hear what's not loud. Tessa nodded. They also don't look behind them. That afternoon, Carolyn moved through the house like someone tracing the edges of a life with a highlighter. She opened every cabinet and drawer, each time asking herself one question: do I want this with me, or is it just a shadow I've mistaken for value? The quilt she and Thomas had bought on a trip to Vermont. Yes. The gift basket Rachel had left untouched last Christmas. No. She packed as she went. No labels, no lists, just quiet decisiveness. Every motion forward was a step away from the fantasy Logan had constructed around her. Compliant, soft-spoken, already half-faded. By sundown, 3 boxes sat by the back door. One was filled with framed photographs. Not all of them were going with her. Some were staying, frozen in time, like tiny protests against the future Rachel was planning. Marie texted at 6:42 p.m. Buyers are serious. Cash. No contingencies. Inspection pending. Carolyn replied with one word. Proceed. She was halfway through wiping down the antique mirror in the upstairs hallway when her phone lit up again. Logan, calling. She let it ring, then watched as it rolled to voicemail once more. From the bedroom window, she could see headlights pulling into the driveway. Rachel's SUV. The Sunday brunch was over. They'd be coming inside, full of mimosas and marketing ideas. But tonight, the house had already spoken. The pen glided across the page with elegant finality. Carolyn sat across from Marie in a quiet, windowless conference room at the title office. No art, no chatter, just 2 chairs. A polished table and a manila folder that now contained a signed purchase agreement. Closing in 21 days. All cash. No contingencies. Carolyn capped the pen and handed it back with steady fingers. Marie checked the signatures, then looked up and smiled. It's done. Carolyn gave a faint nod. Then let's begin the exit. By Monday morning, she was sitting across from a counselor at Heritage Ridge Senior Relocation, a local nonprofit program that helped with discreet housing for elders who didn't want noise, just freedom. We can hold a 2-bedroom duplex for you, the woman explained. Private entrance, ground level. You'll have access to a garden courtyard and community library. Move-in window opens the day after your closing. Sounds fine. Carolyn said. I don't need more than that. She signed the lease with the same calm precision she'd used with the sale documents. When asked about emergency contacts, she listed Tessa, not Logan. Next came the utilities.
Carolyn made the calls one by one, her tone polite but firm.
Termination on possession date. No extensions, no transfers. The cable rep tried to upsell her on a bundle. She declined. Just a clean cutoff, she said.
No forwarding. I won't be here.
She pulled a sheet from her drawer and carefully listed everything left to change. Not accounts, access. Norman was already working on it. Later that evening, she met with him at his office again. Bank privacy lockout is complete, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. Joint CD? Closed. Savings and trust fully restructured. They'll see a wall if they ever try to poke around. Carolyn exhaled, slow and quiet. They won't expect a wall. Norman smiled. That's the beauty of a blind side. It comes from the direction you ignored. Rachel showed up the next afternoon with a paint deck fanned out in her perfectly manicured hands. She swept through the foyer like she owned the walls already. Logan and I thought a soft cream with cool undertones would really pop in the listing photos. Heather said beige is back, but I think we can aim a little higher, don't you? She waved the samples like cue cards. Carolyn stood still, watching her the way you might watch a toddler. Rearrange your silverware. No anger, just amused patience. Rachel didn't notice. She moved through the hallway holding cards up to the light. We could refinish the kitchen cabinets too. Not a gut, just a glow-up. A brush of modern charm. Carolyn didn't respond. Her hands were folded neatly at her waist, the pad of her thumb gently pressing into her palm. When Rachel paused, expecting comment, Carolyn tilted her head. I'm just letting you visualize. That night, Logan cornered her in the dining room with a glossy folder under one arm. Hear me out. Refinancing in both our names might make sense long term. For tax reasons, we'd move some equity around, lower exposure on paper. Everyone wins. Carolyn didn't blink. You'd refinance something that isn't yours? He laughed like she'd misunderstood. It's a strategy, Mom, not a takeover. Trust me, Heather's mapped the whole thing. Carolyn looked past him, toward the framed photo on the buffet. Her and Thomas, Christmas 2002. The tree crooked but lit beautifully behind them. She turned back to Logan. You always say trust me when I shouldn't. Before he could respond, she walked into the kitchen and retrieved a folder from the cabinet, one he hadn't seen before. She laid it on the counter between them and flipped it open. Inside, signed contract. Final terms, title office seal. Closing date circled in red ink. Logan stared at it, then up at her. She said nothing. Rachel appeared in the doorway, seconds later, holding a Sherwin-Williams catalog. Did you pick a tone? Carolyn looked at them both, then said evenly, the house is sold. You have 3 weeks to leave. Rachel blinked. Wait, what? Logan's jaw tightened. Sold to who? Carolyn smiled. To someone who asked. Logan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Carolyn turned, walked to the sink, and poured herself a glass of water. Her voice was calm. Final. I let you play realtor. I let you play designer. Now I'm playing owner. The silence didn't last long. Logan slammed the folder shut so hard the countertop trembled. What the hell is this, Mom? Carolyn stood calmly by the sink, rinsing her water glass, her back to him. It's exactly what it says. You sold it. His voice cracked with disbelief, but the fury underneath was rising fast. Without talking to us? Without even telling me? She turned, towel in hand, and looked at him evenly. You never asked. You told. Rachel was frozen halfway between the dining room and the kitchen, paint samples dangling from her fingers. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Carolyn, we've built so many memories here. Carolyn placed the folded dish towel on the counter like it mattered. Then take them with you. Logan moved to the edge of the counter, gripping it with both hands like it might anchor him. This is my home, my childhood home. Carolyn's voice didn't rise. Which is exactly what it was, your childhood home. He laughed bitterly. And what? You think this is justice? Some stunt to prove a point? She walked over to the buffet and picked up a second folder. No flourish, no drama, just clean execution. She opened it and laid the title certificate flat in front of him. Her name? Only her name. Rachel stepped forward. We could have done this together. You didn't even give us a chance. Carolyn met her gaze for the first time. I gave you space. You filled it with decisions I never made. Logan's face flushed red. I've worked my ass off to build a portfolio. You think I didn't have plans for this place? Long-term equity? It could have gone to Evan. This, Carolyn said, tapping the title certificate with her forefinger, isn't your asset. And Evan is my grandson. Not a line item. He stared at her like she'd just slammed a door in his face. And in a way she had. She picked up both folders, slid them back into her tote, and left the kitchen without another word. That night, the house was unnaturally quiet. Carolyn sat in the sunroom, blanket over her knees, an old Louis L'Amour paperback open in her lap. She wasn't reading it. Her eyes were on the reflection of the porch light in the glass door. Behind her, the murmur of a closed-door argument flickered and died. Footsteps thudded up the stairs. Then nothing. A soft knock broke the stillness. Evan stepped inside, holding a mug of cocoa in both hands. It's the good kind, he said. You know, the one with the mini marshmallows. Carolyn let out a warm breath. Dangerous. He handed it to her and sat on the ottoman across from her, legs folded like he was still 12. Dad's freaking out, he said softly. Like full volcano. I know, but you didn't even yell. Carolyn sipped the cocoa, the sugar warming her throat. No need. Evan tilted his head. Why not? She set the mug down carefully. Because they heard the closing bell. He watched her for a long moment, then nodded like he understood something too big for words. I packed some of the albums already, he offered. She smiled gently. Then you're ahead of schedule. He stood and pulled her into a quick, silent hug. His chin rested briefly on her shoulder. She felt the shape of love there, not loud, not showy, just rooted. When he left the room, she pulled the blanket tighter, leaned her head back, and listened to the stillness. Upstairs, a door slammed. Then another. Then the front door opened and closed. Logan's SUV roared to life outside and peeled down the street like it had somewhere urgent to be. Carolyn didn't rise. She just smiled faintly to herself and turned the page. Heather called first thing Monday morning. Carolyn didn't answer. Marie did. She was sitting in her car in a church parking lot between showings when the screen lit up with the contact name Heather, Logan Pierce referral. She considered letting it ring. Curiosity won. Marie speaking. Heather's voice came fast and bright, all sugar and entitlement. Hi, so I just wanted to check where things stand on the staging calendar. I've been told there's been some confusion. Marie rested her hand on the steering wheel, tone clipped and even. There's no confusion. Heather let out a small laugh. Right, of course. I meant the mixed signals. I know Carolyn's a bit private, but she and I had a good working rhythm, and I don't want to lose momentum. There's no momentum, Marie replied. The listing is mine, and you're not the seller. Silence on the other end. Then excuse me, Marie repeated it. Slower this time, like reading the expiration date on spoiled milk. You're not the seller. Heather's voice shifted gears. Well, Logan and I, Marie cut in. Your client has no authority over the property. If you reach out again on her behalf, it'll be documented. She hung up, saved the call log, and smiled to herself as she pulled out of the lot. Logan got his letter that afternoon. Thick, cream-colored paper, hand-delivered by courier. Norman Bell didn't do email for things like this. The envelope was sealed with wax. Inside, a brief, surgical cease communication notice, citing undue pressure, boundary violation, and a formal warning of escalation should contact with the seller continue. Logan read it in the driveway, twice. Then he crumpled it in one fist and tossed it into the recycling bin like it had personally insulted him. That night, Rachel made her play online. She posted a filtered photo of the living room, the good corner with the neutral light and fresh throw pillows. The caption was clipped, almost poetic. So hard watching people lose their grip on reality. Protect your legacy before others rewrite it. 37 likes in the first hour. A few sympathy comments. One from her college roommate that read, "Sending wine and solidarity." Carolyn read it while sipping mint tea in bed. She didn't comment, didn't react. She took a screenshot. Then she dragged it into a folder on her desktop titled Inheritance Decisions. She closed the laptop without another thought. Tessa stopped by the next morning with a peach cobbler and a new stack of USPS address change forms. "They're rattled," she said as she set the dish down. Carolyn smirked. "I gave them the courtesy of a countdown." Tessa poured 2 cups of coffee. Rachel's gone full public martyr. Logan's in denial. "I'm guessing the next phase is panic. They expected me to fold." "No," Tessa said, stirring in cream. "They expected you to wait until it was too late. They never saw it coming." Carolyn raised her mug. To late innings. They clinked ceramic. Marie's update came via text at noon. Walkthrough set. Buyer's rep confirmed for Friday at 9 a.m. Carolyn tapped out a reply with steady fingers. "Good. I'll leave the lights on." She stood at the window and watched a leaf tumble down from the maple in the front yard, the one Thomas had planted when Logan turned 5. She remembered him digging that hole in August heat, refusing to ask for help. "It'll shade the whole house someday," he'd said. Now it shaded the mailbox. The rest had outgrown itself. She pulled out her planner and circled Friday. The invitation came in the form of a command. Logan didn't phrase it that way, of course. "We need one real sit-down," he'd said over the phone. "Family dinner. To talk this through like adults." But the urgency in his voice wasn't about resolution, it was about control. A last-ditch attempt to reframe the narrative before it slipped entirely from his grip. Carolyn listened, then said simply, "I'll be there." She hung up and packed a suitcase. Just one carry-on size. A few blouses, her toiletry kit, a soft green sweater Evan had given her last Christmas. She folded a photo album flat between layers of fabric and zipped it shut. The sound echoed in her empty room like punctuation. She placed the suitcase gently by the front door and left it there. The dining table was dressed like a magazine cover. Candles, cloth napkins, seasonal runner. Rachel had clearly orchestrated the whole thing. Every fork placement and eucalyptus sprig screamed curated forgiveness. Carolyn sat at the head of the table. They'd given her the seat like a gift, as if the gesture erased everything that came before. Logan carved the roast. Rachel refilled glasses. Evan sat to Carolyn's left, eyes darting back and forth like he was watching a chess clock countdown. They made small talk for 15 minutes. Weather, Evan's school schedule, Logan's recent networking event at a luxury condo build. No one mentioned the sale. Not yet. But it hung there thick in the air like steam above a sealed pot. Finally, Rachel cleared her throat and placed a manila envelope beside Carolyn's plate. "We wanted to show you something," she said. "It's just an idea. An option, really." Carolyn didn't touch it. Logan leaned forward. "It's a simple arrangement. You stay with us. No pressure. We finish the renovation. You get the top floor suite. We put your name on the RIFA. Clean and legal." Carolyn looked at the envelope. "You've already drawn it up." Rachel smiled, proud. "It's not binding, just prepared." Carolyn picked up her napkin, unfolded it slowly across her lap. Then she met Rachel's eyes. "You didn't ask me." Rachel blinked. "What? You planned around me. That's different." Across the table, Evan reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out something small. He held it in his palm, closed fist, then opened it like a magician, revealing a final move. It was a chess queen. Obsidian black, worn at the base from years of use. "I found it under the couch cushion when I was boxing things," he said, voice low but steady. "I think it's yours." Carolyn took it with a small private smile. She turned it between her fingers, solid, weighty, the shape of final say. She placed it gently beside her water glass. Then she stood. Logan looked up sharply. "Wait, aren't you going to read?" "No." Rachel tried to recover. "Carolyn, we're just trying to give you security." Carolyn reached for her purse. Security isn't something you give, it's something you protect. She walked out of the room, not fast, not dramatic, just firm and final. The door didn't slam. She didn't look back. Outside, the evening was soft with early spring air. The porch light cast long shadows down the walkway as Carolyn stepped into the quiet. In the house behind her, two voices rose, one anxious, one insistent. She didn't hear the words. She didn't need to. Her car keys were already in her hand. The title office smelled like toner and fresh carpet, a strangely sterile setting for the death of an era. Carolyn sat at the polished oak conference table beside Marie, whose blazer was crisp, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense twist. Everything was ready, papers clipped, initials tagged, pens prepped like scalpels. Last page, Marie said, sliding the closing documents forward. Carolyn adjusted her glasses and signed her name for the final time, slow and deliberate. Every loop of her cursive felt like a release. Ownership surrendered, not by force, but by choice. Marie tapped a key on her tablet. Funds wired. Full amount confirmed. Carolyn nodded once. No tears. No sentimentality. Only the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed on her terms. Outside, the new buyers, Kyle and Marissa, the couple from the walkthrough, were posing in front of the house, arms linked, holding a sold placard. Marie had tucked in her trunk. Their golden retriever barked happily in the back seat of their SUV. Carolyn watched from the sidewalk as Marissa took a selfie, then leaned into her husband's shoulder and whispered something with visible joy. Good, Carolyn thought. Let it hold more for them than it was allowed to hold for her in the end. She was walking toward her car when a familiar vehicle screeched around the corner and rolled to an abrupt stop in front of the house. Logan, he got out too fast, shirt untucked, one cuff still unbuttoned. His eyes scanned the scene. Marie, the couple, the camera, the handshake, like he was trying to plug a leak already flooding the room. What the hell is going on? He barked. Where's Heather? Marie turned to him with flawless calm. You're late. I wasn't told there was a final walk today, because there wasn't. This is the buyer's possession photo. The sale closed an hour ago. Logan looked to Carolyn, then back to Marie. This is my mother. You can't just cut family out of a transaction like this. Marie smiled, polite, professional, and lethal. You're not listed on anything. Kindly leave. The couple looked away awkwardly. The dog barked again, as if echoing the dismissal. Carolyn didn't flinch. Logan's jaw tightened, but for the first time, he had nothing to say. No bluff to play, no claws to cite. He stood there stunned as Carolyn turned, opened her car door, and drove away without a backward glance. Her new duplex sat in a quiet corner of a senior-friendly complex, just 15 minutes away, but emotionally, it might as well have been another life. One story, private entrance, a little fenced garden out front that she already planned to fill with potted mint and basil. No shared walls, no shared decision-making. Tessa met her there with grocery staples and a potted lavender. Evan brought the box labeled Chess Plus Photos. They unpacked in rhythm. Carolyn directing, Tessa smoothing linens, Evan arranging paperbacks and picture frames in soft reverence. Feels like you've been here forever, Tessa said, laying out placemats at the small kitchen table. I've been gone a long time, Carolyn replied. I'm just catching up. Once the boxes were in and the fridge was humming, Carolyn disappeared into the bedroom for a moment. When she returned, she held a red accordion folder, thick, secured with two flat brass clasps. She set it on the dining table, opened it, and pulled out the newly notarized Living Trust Amendment. Evan looked up from where he was shelving books. What's that? She looked at him over the edge of her glasses. It's everything they thought they'd inherit. With their names removed, Tessa raised her brows slightly but said nothing. Carolyn flipped the document closed, slid it back into the folder, and smiled as she tucked it into the drawer beneath the silverware. No one gets to redraw my legacy without asking first. That evening, as the porch lights flickered on outside, Carolyn stood barefoot in her new kitchen, stirring a pot of chicken and rice soup. No granite counters, no open concept, just peace. She moved slowly, intentionally queen on her own board, taking the center space back. The bank lobby was sleek, Modern, nothing like the oak-paneled branch, where Carolyn and Thomas had opened their first joint account in the 1980s. Here, everything was brushed steel, frosted glass, and tablet check-ins. Still, the teller greeted her with a warm smile and offered her a private consultation room, no questions asked. Inside, Carolyn placed her ID and a small envelope on the desk. "I'd like to open a new account, separate from any existing household affiliations." The young banker typed quickly, nodding. "Any specific access limitations you'd like to place?" "Yes," Carolyn said. "Only mine. And no links to anyone named Logan Pierce." She said it the way someone orders a decaf, simple, factual, final. Once the account was open and fully secured, she pulled a second envelope from her purse. Inside, a certificate of deposit Logan had opened in both their names years ago. He'd called it for convenience, said it was safer to tie things together for taxes. She slid it across the table. "I'd like to close this." The banker scanned the form. "You're listed first on this, which gives you the authority to withdraw and dissolve." "I know," Carolyn said. The process took 12 minutes. She left with a receipt and a printed confirmation that no co-access remained on any of her assets. Outside, the sky was clear and blue, unseasonably crisp for May. She breathed it in like it cost something, like it was earned. Norman Bell stopped by her duplex that afternoon. Paperwork in hand, trust amendments been filed, state recorded, irrevocable. He took a seat at the kitchen table, where a second cup of coffee was already waiting for him. Carolyn knew his preferences. 2 sugars, no cream. "Estate structure?" she asked. "Bulletproof," he said. "They'd need a time machine and a signed confession to contest any of it. And even then, I'd like their odds better in Vegas." Carolyn smiled. "I've always admired your bedside manner." Norman finished his coffee, left the file folder on the table, and tipped an imaginary hat as he exited. No small talk, just quiet loyalty, the kind that doesn't need an audience. Later that evening, Carolyn checked her email and saw a message from Rachel. Subject: a second chance. It opened with a cheery "Hi, Carolyn," and launched into a full paragraph about misunderstandings, emotional distance, the stress of real estate, and how family is more important than paperwork. She ended it with a gentle offer to revisit things when emotions aren't so raw. Carolyn read it once. She did not reply. Instead, she moved the email to her archive, then dragged it into her digital folder labeled Legacy Shield, a new one, created just that week. She closed her laptop and returned to the living room. Evan sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by wood planks, screws, and a single dog-eared manual. The IKEA bookshelf was halfway there, 2 shelves already locked into place, the side rails resting gently against the wall. "You're sure this goes here?" he asked, holding up a narrow piece. Carolyn bent down to look. "Other side. Flip it." He rotated it, nodded, and fitted in place. It clicked. "There," she said. "Sturdy and simple. Just like me." Evan laughed softly. "It's gonna hold a lot." "Good. I've got stories to keep." When the shelf was done, they stacked it with paperbacks, photo frames, and one heavy photo album, the one she'd packed beneath her green sweater before the dinner. She stood back, looked at the finished piece. Quiet, useful, loved. "This," Carolyn said, touching the corner gently, "is what inheritance looks like." As the sun dipped behind the trees outside, she turned on the porch light, not for safety, but for welcome. The light glowed warm on the new welcome mat. A quiet symbol, no inheritance was owed, but something earned, that stayed. The letter took her less than 10 minutes to write. It wasn't anger that guided her hands, it was clarity. The kind that comes only when every emotion has been sifted down to something hard and clean and weightless. Carolyn sat at her small dining table, the light overhead, casting a perfect circle onto the page. Beside her, a legal-sized envelope waited open, already addressed. She slid in 3 items: a copy of the deed, her name and only hers, a copy of the escrow deposit receipt showing the funds transferred in full, and a single page typed. The font was 12-point, Times New Roman. The margins were narrow, deliberate. It read, "Next time, speak to me. Not over me, She signed nothing, left no return address, just a name on the mailbox they no longer controlled. Sandy, the HOA liaison for her new community, stopped by that morning to introduce herself and drop off a welcome packet. As she flipped through the pages about pet policies and recycling pickup, her eyes landed on the envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. "Legal mail?" she asked, half casual. Carolyn handed it over, unsealed. "Would you mind walking this down to outgoing? I want it time-stamped today." Sandy pulled the letter halfway out, scanned the note, and raised an eyebrow. "Well," she said, after a beat, folding it neatly back into the envelope. "That's sharp." Sharp was the point, Carolyn replied, taping the flap shut. "And final." Sandy gave her a small nod. "We'll get along just fine." That afternoon, Evan sprawled on the floor again, scissors in one hand and a pile of old photos fanned out in front of him. Carolyn had pulled a laminator from the hallway closet, still in the box from her office days. She hadn't used it since 2004. "Where do you want these?" he asked, holding up a laminated picture of Carolyn and Thomas on their 30th anniversary, caught mid-laugh by a cousin with a shaky hand. Carolyn took it gently, ran her fingers along the sealed edges. "Hallway. Eye level. That one's earned a front row." They worked quietly, side by side, sealing memories into permanence. No edits, no filters. At one point, Evan glanced up. "You're keeping a lot more than I expected." "I'm not purging the past," she said softly. "I'm just putting it back in my hand." Later, she stood in her closet, staring at the white tote bag Rachel had once gifted her, part of the home reset starter kit. Inside was the laminated mood board Rachel had emailed months ago, printed in color and mounted on foam. Soft cream walls, open shelving, accent tiles, fresh equity vibes. Carolyn stared at it for a long moment, then zipped up the tote and placed it at the top of a small pile labeled donation. The next morning, she dropped it off at the Goodwill box near the grocery store, sliding it in without ceremony. Fresh equity could serve someone else now. That evening, she opened a secure PDF from Norman titled "Permanent Disinheritance Addendum Filed and Witnessed and Enforceable by Texas Probate Code." She printed it, signed where required, and filed it in the same drawer as the deed copies, utility records, and Marie's commission receipt. It was done. It was real. It was hers. After dinner, she walked out onto her porch barefoot, holding a cup of lemon tea. The air was warm but quiet, the kind of stillness that asks nothing from you. Inside, the laminator was cooling. The hallway wall had begun to fill with her past, sealed in glossy permanence. No updates, no editing. It arrived on a Thursday, a thick white envelope, hand-addressed in Logan's upright slanted print. No return address, no stamp. Just dropped into the complex's mail slot, sometime between morning coffee and Carolyn's walk with Tessa. She held it lightly, as if it might spill something if tilted. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she made tea, black, strong, unsweetened. She sipped it at the kitchen window while the envelope sat untouched on the counter, its silence louder than apology. She'd expected outrage. But regret, that was new. Only after the mug was empty did she slit the envelope open with a paring knife. The letter was 4 pages, single-spaced, a slow unraveling of ego, coded in phrases like, "We made mistakes, and I didn't realize how far things had gone." Words that tried to spread guilt thin enough to share. He referenced the heat of the moment, Rachel's ideas getting out of hand and only wanting what was best for the family. At the bottom of page 3, he used the word forgiveness, not as a plea, but a forecast. Carolyn folded the pages carefully. She didn't sigh, didn't tear them up. She placed them in a new envelope. On the front, she wrote in her neat, steady hand, "Read after I'm gone." Then she sealed it and slid it into her fireproof lockbox, next to the disinheritance paperwork and her living will. That afternoon, she updated her final wishes file. She removed the old contact list, the one that had Rachel listed for arrangements and Logan marked for executor responsibilities. She replaced them both with Norman and added a second emergency contact, Evan, just in case. She printed the revised form, triple-checked the entries, and called Norman to schedule a notarization. He arrived later that evening, his briefcase and notary seal in tow. You sure about this? He asked, handing her the file with practiced care. I've never been surer, she said. This time, no one rewrites me in pen after I'm gone. He pressed his stamp down with a slow, satisfying click. Then, it's law. 2 days later, she walked into her financial planner's office with a folder and a quiet agenda. I'd like to set up a charitable remainder trust, she said. One that bypasses direct descendants. The advisor raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't blink. Do you have beneficiaries in mind? Yes, Carolyn replied. Educational grants, literacy programs, girls in under-resourced districts, something that grows after I'm done. She transferred her entire IRA. No loopholes, no access. That night, Evan sat on the floor of her living room again. This time, finishing a puzzle they'd started last week, an old Norman Rockwell print of a kitchen scene, filled with chaos and warmth. He placed the final piece and looked up. So, it's really over? Carolyn set down her tea and joined him on the floor, knees creaking. No, she said. It's really begun. He looked at the finished puzzle, then back at her. What happens now? Carolyn leaned back on her palms, staring up at the ceiling, as if she could see the blueprint of what came next etched in soft white lines. Now, she said, we live quietly, clearly, fully. They sat there a while longer, neither speaking. The porch light outside flicked on automatically. The day had shifted, so had everything else. The envelope arrived by certified mail, thick with desperation disguised as paperwork. Carolyn opened it at her kitchen counter, not with dread, but with the same quiet curiosity she gave to weather reports. Inside, legal challenge documents, filed by Logan and Rachel, request for preliminary injunction, contestation of mental capacity. A footnote citing emotional instability due to aging trauma. Carolyn read it once, then slid the packet into a manila folder labeled Defense Not Needed. She picked up the phone. Norman, they filed. He didn't even pause. Then we end it. 2 weeks later, Carolyn sat in a crisp navy dress behind a polished wood table at the Plano Municipal Courthouse. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Norman stood beside her, flanked by a meticulously organized binder and 3 notarized affidavits. He moved like a man presenting museum evidence, careful, clinical, complete. Opposite them, Logan looked oddly smaller in a rented blazer. Rachel wore an expression that flickered between defiance and fear. Their attorney leaned into technicalities, predisposition, late-stage stress, undue influence. Norman didn't interrupt. He waited for silence. Then calmly, precisely, he laid out, Carolyn's neurocognitive exam passed. Video timestamp of her signing with a licensed notary, recorded. 2 independent witnesses, neither related, present and affirmed. Bank correspondence, digital chain of custody, medical records and capacity certification, signed 6 days before any documents were executed. She didn't stumble into these decisions, Norman said, voice quiet and firm. She architected them. The judge barely glanced at Logan's side of the table before scribbling something with finality and closing the file. Petition dismissed. No appeals filed, no continuances granted. Just one clean bang of the gavel, and then it was over. The following week, Carolyn met with the HOA chair in her small community office, a single room with ferns on the sill and laminated meeting, minutes from 3 months prior. I'd like to file a boundary notification, she said, handing over a typed letter. From your son? The woman asked gently. Yes. And daughter-in-law? Verbal harassment. Attempted access. I'm not afraid, but I am tired. The woman read it. Nodded. Noted. You'll be added to our do not contact list. Security will be informed. Carolyn left with a copy stamped and signed. No confrontation, no announcement, just documentation. That evening, she sat at her desk with one last set of forms, the final transfer of her remaining liquid assets into Evan's education trust. She filled them out slowly, like she was planting something, root by root, not for bloom, but for endurance. Evan would be the beneficiary of a future she built with paper cuts and silence. Not out of spite, but protection. She wasn't locking doors. She was choosing who held the spare key. Tessa arrived just after sunset, with a bottle of wine and a bag of licorice twists. She glanced at the notarized form on the desk and raised an eyebrow. That the last of it? Carolyn nodded. Every last penny they thought they had coming. Tessa poured them each a glass, the red wine catching the lamplight. She lifted hers in a quiet toast. The sharpest blade? Carolyn lifted hers back, steady and sure. Silence with receipts. They clinked. Later that night, Carolyn sat on the edge of her bed, reading an old birthday card from Evan. Age 10, pencil scribbled, full of misspellings and love. She tucked it into the top drawer of her nightstand beside the trust papers. No fireworks, no revenge fantasy, just the airtight calm of knowing it was all finally legally permanently settled. It was buried beneath a roll of parchment paper and an old measuring tape. Carolyn hadn't opened the far left kitchen drawer in weeks, not since move-in. But that morning, she was looking for the good scissors when her fingers brushed something small, cool, and familiar. She pulled it out slowly. A house key, bronzed, slightly scuffed around the teeth. The number 1021 etched faintly near the bow. Her first home, the tiny bungalow off Spring Street, where she and Thomas had raised Logan in the early days. Before ambition hardened him. Before the mortgage was something more than a contract. She turned it over in her palm, thumb grazing the edges. Not a relic, a root. By afternoon, she'd gone to the craft store and picked up a deep walnut shadow box. She lined it with soft gray felt and centered the key with 2 brass pins. Above it, on cream cardstock, she hand-lettered a phrase in permanent ink, not given, chosen. She hung it on the hallway wall near the laminated photos. It fit there, quietly sovereign among the gallery of memories she'd kept. The scholarship banquet was held at a community hall just outside McKinney, with folding chairs and foil-wrapped centerpiece. Evan wore a suit that was just slightly too short in the sleeve and tried not to fidget as the keynote speaker droned on about perseverance and grit. Carolyn sat in the front row, pearls clasped at her neck, program folded neatly in her lap. When Evan's name was called, full tuition, STEM scholarship, renewable, she stood with the rest of the crowd, clapping softly, heart warm but calm. She didn't need to scream for his success. She had already paved the ground beneath his. Later, she posed beside him for a photo near the dessert table. Evan held his certificate with both hands and leaned toward her. They asked if I wanted to invite more family, he said. I didn't. Carolyn tilted her head. That's allowed? He smiled. Legacy doesn't mean obligation. She looped her arm through his. No, she said. It means continuity. Back at the duplex, the porch light glowed early against a moody sky. Tessa arrived with a bottle of red and a loaf of warm, crusty bread. She paused in the entryway, her eyes landing on the new shadow box in the hallway. You framed it. Carolyn nodded. It felt right. Tessa read the inscription, then exhaled. You built the boundary. Carolyn smiled faintly and locked the gate. They sat on the couch with glasses in hand, the bread torn in rough pieces between them. No toasts, no ceremony, just quiet communion between women who knew the price of. The next morning, Carolyn woke early and pulled on a soft flannel coat. She didn't wake Evan. She didn't call Tessa. She just drove. The park hadn't changed much. The wooden benches had been painted over since last spring, and a new plaque marked the shaded grove where Thomas once napped under Sunday trees. But the walking path still curved like memory, worn, predictable, steady. She took her time. No headphones, no agenda, just breath. The ducks were already out, dipping into the edge of the pond. A toddler squealed near the swings. Somewhere behind her, a dog barked with uncontainable joy. Carolyn reached the far end of the loop and stopped by a wide sycamore. She placed one hand on the trunk, eyes closed for just a second. In her coat pocket was the spare copy of the framed key. She didn't plan to bury it or toss it. She just held it there, cold, solid, real. You don't burn down history to rebuild. You prune it. You choose what stays. She turned and walked back the way she came. Evan brought the recorder on a Sunday. Not the phone. Not some app. A real voice recorder, square matte black, clipped from his media class kit. He set it on the coffee table like a respectful offering, not a demand. Carolyn raised an eyebrow as she sipped her tea. He cleared his throat. We're doing legacy interviews. For class, people we admire who shaped something. Would you tell your story? She paused, her thumb tracing the handle of the mug. Start it, she said. He clicked the red button. For a moment the room held its breath. Then she began, not from the day the house was listed, or the moment the letter arrived. She started where the real story lived, the moment she realized silence had made her invisible. She told it simply, without performance. She wove through the years of compromise and the slow erosion of presence in her own life. Logan's certainty, Rachel's strategies, the way her yes had been assumed before it was offered. She didn't cry. She didn't name call. She just built the narrative brick by brick, quiet, firm, and owned. When she finished, Evan hit pause and let the silence settle. He didn't ask for edits. He didn't ask for more. Instead, he said, "That's gonna land hard." In a good way. Carolyn gave a small smile. It should. By late afternoon, the sun filtered gold across the walls of her duplex. She was back in her reading chair, legs tucked beneath her, the soft hum of laundry in the background. The stack of legal files, title, trust, healthcare directive, was neatly tucked in the drawer beneath her lamp. Every document filed, every decision signed, nothing left open. Evan sat across from her now, fidgeting with the recorder's case. "You ever regret it?" he asked softly. She looked up. "The house, the trust, the whole thing." "No," he said. "I mean all of it. The way you took it back." She leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, voice low and steady. "I only regret the years I spent asking permission to be heard." Evan didn't speak right away. He just nodded, slowly, like he was folding the truth into memory. Carolyn sat back and looked toward the hallway wall. The framed key, the laminated photos, and just beneath the sconce, a new plaque had been mounted. Simple script, sanded wood, property of Carolyn Pierce. No date, no context. It didn't need one. That night, she turned off the lights, one by one. In the kitchen drawer, the good scissors were finally where they belonged. The framed key glinted under the hallway bulb, and the shadow box cast a quiet outline on the wall behind. She climbed into bed, pulled the quilt up over her shoulders, and exhaled long. From the nightstand, the voice recorder blinked softly. Charged, stored, saved. Not for the courts. Not for legacy battles. For story. Her story. Not inherited. Not assumed. Not overwritten. Just chosen. They made their plans. I made the sale.